A rights group has filed a case against the UK government for selling arms to Saudi Arabia, emphasizing that the weapons are escalating a major political crisis in war-torn Yemen. The UK's High Court has started hearing the case initiated by the Campaign Against Arms Trade, or the CAAT, which stresses that the weapons exports have resulted in deaths of thousands of civilians in Yemen. Hello and welcome to TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of TFI Media Group. I am your host Ananya Sharma. Let's begin. The CAAT is challenging the legality of a decision taken by the British government in 2020 to continue exporting weapons to the Saudi-led coalition, which is embroiled in a 9-year war in Yemen. It is true that the weapons sold by Western nations, including the United Kingdom and the US, are responsible for many innocent deaths. In fact, an Oxfam report uncovered that around 87 civilians were killed and 136 injured in just a year by weapons sold by the UK and the US to the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen. The US is the biggest supplier of weapons to Saudi Arabia. The UK is the second largest. The report also emphasized that the weapons supplied solely by them have been used in hundreds of attacks on civilians in Yemen between January 2021 and the end of February 2022. The US and the UK are responsible for grave human rights abuses in Yemen. Their neglect of human suffering exhibits a shameless desire for profits. However, ironically, when it comes to the issue of human rights, Western countries have often tried to become the torchbearers, but the realities are different. We know from history that the US and Europe go after those sovereign nations which refuse to accept their hegemonic presence in the geopolitical arena and falsely accuse them of human rights violations in order to justify the imposition of sanctions on them. The US has done that with Russia many times. The Biden administration falsely accused Moscow on human rights violations in its country reports on human rights practices. The report noted without evidence that the Russian government perpetrated human rights abuses in Crimea and Chechnya, and even stated that Putin's regime was behind the attempted assassination of opposition politician Alexei Navalny. They followed suit in the case of Myanmar as well, with the UK government accusing the military junta of serious human rights abuses. Later, London announced asset freezes and travel bans on 3 generals in the Burmese military, and Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab noted that he will hold the Myanmar's military accountable. But what about the human rights abuses perpetrated by Western nations around the world? Why do the US and UK never get sanctioned for war crimes in Middle Eastern countries, African countries, and Asian countries?
DDoS attack. DDoS stands for Distributed Denial of Services. It is a malicious attempt to disrupt the normal traffic of a targeted server, service, or network by overwhelming the target or its surrounding infrastructure with a flood of internet traffic. TFIGlobal app, which has been pivotal in bypassing the YT police and reach every nook and corner of the world, was subjected to 5 days of DDoS attacks. We had to take the app offline, add some more layers of security, and then relaunch it. Who did it? I don't know. Chinese hackers? Maybe. We are too small to be considered big by CIA and various European intelligence agencies. But who knows? The fact is that we braved the attack and we are back. So if you have the app installed, please update it. If you don't have the app installed, please install it. The link can be found in the description. Remember, Google Play has already banned us, calling us a hate app. So Android users will need to download the APK file from our web link. Remember, they can't stop us till the time we have you on our side. Namaste.
The US is responsible for grave crimes against humanity in Syria and Iraq. In fact, a top-secret military force repeatedly killed civilians and committed war crimes in Iraq and Syria. The military unit known secretly as Talon Anvil was deployed in war-torn Middle Eastern nations from 2014 to 2019. A former staffer of Talon Anvil broke the codes of secrecy and told journalists at the New York Times that American soldiers used to disregard laws created to protect civilians during conflict. The US followed the same deplorable pattern in Vietnam. American soldiers committed one of the most reprehensible crimes in the world known as the My Lai massacre. My Lai is a village in Vietnam which was targeted by American soldiers in 1968 during the war. The US troops opened fire on an unarmed civilian population, killing thousands of women, children, and the elderly. Similarly, in the 2 decades long Afghanistan war, the US and its allies perpetrated countless atrocities. The UK, which is always standing beside the US when it sanctions other nations, also committed serious crimes in Iraq. There is widespread evidence that British soldiers were involved in rape, torture, and sexual violence in Iraq. However, despite ample evidence of the guilt of Western nations, the US and the UK and their allies never got punished for their war crimes. The victims and families of the crimes committed by US and UK soldiers are still waiting for justice. Therefore, the West has absolutely no right to condemn other countries in the name of human rights when their own track record is so deplorable. This begs the question: should the international rules-based order be changed to punish the unpunished war criminals? We will wait for your answers.